The Scientist by Talking Soup. Chapter 4. Determination. Things had settled comfortably back into a human-free lull in the underground. While work on Save and Reset was on hold, no surprises there, the determination experiments and other research continued apace. Gaster had turned all of his attention to the work with determination. Progress was slow. Too slow. Gaster could feel desperation creeping up on him. It was late one night after the rest of the staff had gone home, and Gaster was at a computer in the basement lab, compiling data from the latest rounds of tests. The only other person there was Sans. Dr. Beatus was out of town for a few days and had roped Sans into keeping an eye on the lab mice. Both scientists were quiet, Gaster watching the computer screen with tired eyes, and Sans patrolling the cages, ticking off a checklist. He occasionally muttered about it being intern work, but Gaster ignored him. Something on the computer dinged. Gaster rubbed his eyes and peered at the alert that had popped up.
Looks like the magic regulating the temperature of the mice is running low,
Gaster said with a sigh.
One would think we never paid our magic bill around here. Sans, do you mind?
What? Gaster rubbed his eyes again, debating whether to get a fifth cup of coffee.
Do you mind refilling the magic gauge? It's there on the wall.
Oh, sure. There was a pause. How? Gaster waved a hand.
Using magic, one would imagine, yes. Shooting a few bullets into it usually works.
There was a longer pause this time, and no characteristic sound of monster bullets. I can't, actually. Gaster finally looked up, turning in his office chair. He did not have the energy for Sans' jokes right now.
What do you mean you can't? I'm not asking you to power the core, Sans.
Sans had an odd look on his face, somewhere between amused and cornered. I mean that I'm not good with magic. At all. Gaster got reluctantly to his feet, not sure where this joke was going. A monster not being good at magic was like a flame not being good at burning things.
I failed to see the humor in this joke, but if you're going to be difficult...
He crossed the room to where a small tube emerged from the wall near the mouse cages, an indicator light above it blinking slowly red. I'm actually not trying to be humorous for once. Okay, that was bad. Sans rubbed the back of his skull. I'm weak, Gaster. Incredibly weak. Haven't you noticed? My soul is basically held together with stubbornness and humor. And my boundless charm, of course. Gaster had stopped at the temperature gauge and was staring at Sans. The skeleton looked rather pinned down. Why do you think I'm so short? Why do you think I haven't used magic even once since you hired me? Look, this is pretty much all I can do. He held out his hands, palm up, and squeezed his eye sockets shut. For a moment, he almost looked pained. Then two tiny rotating bones appeared floating above his hands. Sans inhaled sharply. This and some minor telekinesis, but it's really unstable. Half the time it doesn't even work. The bones fizzled out of existence and Sans shoved his hands into the pockets of his lab coat. When I was a baby Bones, I was sick all the time. I'd stay in my room and read about science, history. I'm better now, but I still have a bad time using magic. I'm pretty sure all my magic is being spent on keeping me alive. Gaster stared at Sans, processing what he was hearing. Sans was looking everywhere but at him.
What you're telling me,
Gaster said quietly,
is that you have absolutely no way of attacking the enemy or of defending yourself?
He spread his hands and summoned some of his own bullets, watching them spin and hover in the air. They were shaped like hand signs and other symbols.
So if I shot these at you, or accidentally lost control of them, you would die in a matter of seconds?
Sans visibly tensed, his eyelights fixed on Gaster's bullets. Gaster felt a little sick. No. he said after a moment. I got good at dodging. I'm very good at dodging. And you wouldn't do that. Gaster sent the bullets into the magic gauge on the wall. The light changed to green. The relief on Sans' face was painful to see.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound so...
Gaster shook his head and rubbed at his forehead.
But I really don't appreciate secrets. My God, Sans, why didn't you tell me? A single lab accident and...
I mean, yeah, a lab accident or a rock falling from the cavern ceiling, or drowning in one of the waterfalls or falling into the core. Yeah, any of those could kill me, and they could also kill anyone else. Sans shrugged, a grin easing its way back onto his face. I'm not made of glass, Doc. I've lived my whole life like this. It's not a big deal. People tend to get funny when I tell them, but it's not like I hide it. I just don't make a fuss about it.
You outright lied on your job application,
Gaster said, glaring down at him.
You said that you had no medical issues that could impede your work.
I didn't lie. Sans tapped his fingers together. I just left some things out. It's not a medical issue, and it doesn't impede my work. When have you ever seen it impede my work?
Your sleep patterns. I suppose this explains why you're constantly falling asleep at your desk, yes?
That's just me being a lazybones. If I thought I was going to fall asleep doing something important, like mixing chemicals or something, I wouldn't have...
Important? What exactly gave you the indication that anything we do here is not important?
Sans sighed. Come on, that's not fair. You know what I meant.
You lied to me, Sans.
Sans looked up at him, his expression shifting for the faintest moment into something sharp. Doc, it's not like you haven't been keeping secrets too. Gaster was shocked into silence. A soul held together by stubbornness, humor, and sheer nerve was more like it.
That's an interesting way to speak to your boss, Sans.
I don't mean any disrespect, sir, but it's the truth, isn't it? I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but I've always been observant. Your hands were shaking at the meeting yesterday, and last week I heard you wheezing in your office. When I knocked, you pretended everything was fine. I've been noticing it for months. Gaster's hands were shaking, but not from weakness this time.
Sans.
You're sick, aren't you? Sans looked down, hands deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched. No, more than that. You're dying. Silence. Gaster could deny it. He could yell at Sans. The skeleton had no right to know such a thing. But he said nothing. He couldn't think of a thing to say. Sans pressed a hand to his face briefly before shoving it back in his pocket. I'm sorry. Obviously you have a reason for keeping it secret. It's private. Don't worry, I'm not going to go spreading it around. Gaster sighed and leaned back against the tiled wall, letting himself feel just how exhausted he was for the first time that night. Not just exhausted, old, worn out.
I appreciate your discretion.
Is there anything that can be done?
I have lived a very long time, Sans.
Gaster looked out the doorway. Across the hallway lay the shadow of the determination extractor.
At this point, there is only one thing that can be done.
Sans looked at the mice in their rows of cages. Most of them were asleep. Those who weren't were going about their mousy business in a very calculated manner. These days, they didn't act like animals much at all. The more we study determination, the more I worry about it. Dr. Beatus seems to agree with me. If magic is the glue that keeps a monster from falling apart, then that's what determination is for humans. I don't think mixing two types of glue is going to make anything but a mess.
Science is about taking risks, Sans. But you shouldn't worry. I have some time left, and I am not a fool.
Gaster closed his eyes.
But you must understand. I need to see this through to the end. I need to see the monsters freed. I remember the war. I remember when we were sealed underground. I remember the surface. I am one of the last monsters left alive who still remembers. You have no idea, Sans. You have absolutely no idea what it's like.
Sans was quiet for a moment before saying, I guess I don't. Gaster didn't answer. He hadn't talked about these sorts of things in ages. Perhaps with Asgore, but he couldn't remember the last time they even had tea together. The king had changed so much since Asriel's death, and the castle always felt empty without Toriel's laughter. It was strange, having someone to confide in again.
I appreciate your discretion.
He couldn't have Sans spreading all this around. It was far too late in his life for people to think of Gaster as emotional. Don't worry. Sans chuckled a little. Though if you keep talking to me like this, you might have to stop thinking of me as an employee and start thinking of me as a friend. Heh. But it's really bad news to try to be friends with your boss, right? Gaster covered his face with a hand and laughed. He hadn't let himself truly laugh in a long time.
Why not colleagues?
Gaster offered a hand. Sans grinned and took it. It's pretty unprofessional, which is good, 'cause that's right up my alley.
Color me unsurprised,
Gaster said, standing up from the wall. He turned to face Sans fully.
I think I will leave the rest of the data to compile overnight. I could use a drink.
Yeah? Same. Hey, I know a great place in Snowdon.
A bit of a trek, but I am up for it if you are.
Gaster put his computer in sleep mode and headed out the door, Sans close behind.
You know, perhaps once the experiments are finished, and we know it's safe, determination could benefit us both.
Yeah? You thinking of turning me into a science project, Doc?
Of course not, but I may have a few ideas.
Gaster couldn't believe his ears when they told him another human had been spotted in the underground. It had been less than a year since they had acquired the light blue human soul. Comparatively, there had been almost a decade-long gap between the first fallen human and the second. This new human had been spotted near Snowdon as well. There must have been a large hole into the underground in that region, perhaps back in the ruins where the original home had once stood. It made sense. Perhaps the first cave that the humans had driven them into was starting to become unburied. The human was currently missing, possibly hiding out in Snowdon. In all likelihood, the human was hiding in plain sight. Only a tiny handful of living monsters even knew what a human looked like. It didn't help that a good portion of that handful were dog monsters from the Royal Guard, who had notoriously bad memories. The stress of waiting was bad for Gaster's already poor condition. The human might not be a child this time. Children were dangerous enough, but an adult who had only ever heard of monsters in stories, as humans didn't live nearly long enough for anyone to be alive to remember, an adult would have intent behind their fear. Monsters were very vulnerable to bad intent. But Gaster couldn't exactly assist with the search. He spent the majority of those days pacing around his office instead, worried. Sans occasionally pried him away at nights for a round of drinks at Grilby's, but that was mostly an excuse to go to Snowdon and keep an eye out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Gaster received word that the human had been captured. Later that day, a guard arrived with a delivery, a bright orange soul, safely housed in a container, and a large box. It fought back, the guard explained, expression grim. Killed one of the new recruits. Poor kid had just joined up. She was so excited. At least I can tell her family that she died a hero. The human's body was battered. It was still a child, but quite a lot older than the one before. A teenager, Gaster thought. Its face was tight with a final expression of anger and ferocity. Determination. Though it hadn't been enough this time.
Why bring me the body?
Sorry, come again? Gaster spoke slower.
Why bring the body to me?
Oh, King Asgore wants the bodies of any humans brought to the castle, where they can be interred and honored for their sacrifice. But he said that you might want to study the body first. Gaster nodded and replaced the cover on the box.
Thoughtful but unnecessary. An empty human body has little use.
Fair enough. I'll see it safely delivered to the castle then.
Thank you. And I am sorry for the loss of your recruit. My condolences to her family. I will make sure that her sacrifice is not in vain.
The guard gave a solemn nod. Thank you for that, Doctor. You know, I knew humans were vicious, but this one, I don't know if vicious is the word I would use. It almost seemed like a cornered animal. Desperate.
I believe this one was female.
Yeah? Kinda hard to tell. The guard frowned at the box. She kept screaming at us about a missing sister, accusing us of eating her. Imagine that. She was crying even a little while she kept fighting us. It's kinda sad. We just couldn't reason with her. A real shame. Gaster held the soul container in his hands and stared into the fiery orange light.
A shame.
One night while he was working late, Gaster collapsed in his office. It was sudden, as if his body had simply stopped working. He lay on the office floor, gasping for breath, struggling to rise. Too soon. No, this was too soon. He was so close. The determination experiments were nearing completion. The work with the orange human soul had borne all kinds of new fruit, but had yielded no evidence of save power. They were stuck again on save and reset, which meant that the determination experiments had to come through. He was so close. And yet here he was, fallen down. He could almost feel his insides dissolving. Not yet, not yet. Gaster managed to hook his fingers around the arm of his desk chair. He pulled himself slowly, painfully, into an almost sitting position. Not yet. In a few days, maybe a week, they would be able to begin determination testing with monster subjects. And then, that dissolving feeling. He couldn't wait a few days. He was practically snarling as he forced his body upward. He planted one shaking foot beneath him, then another. He stood, shaking, leaning heavily on the edge of the desk. No more hesitating. He was out of time. The elevator. He just had to get to the elevator. He managed to press one hand against the wall and took a step, then another. The walk to his office door suddenly felt like miles. The elevator would be another 30 yards or so, with no walls to lean on. He gritted his teeth. Somehow, he reached the door and managed to push it open. He rested against the door frame, breathing hard.
Hello?
Even his voice was weak. It didn't matter. The lights throughout the laboratory were all off. Everyone had gone home, even Sans and Dr. Beatus. He was alone. He had to do this alone. He could see the elevator from the doorway. It might as well have been on the other side of the underground.
Do it. Walk. You cannot die yet.
He walked, every step slow, every step shaking, every step sending another stab of pain through his whole being. The hallway slid in and out of focus. Halfway there, his body gave out again and he went down on one knee. No, he would not allow this. He simply wouldn't. He pulled himself back up, and there was the elevator. Just down a few flights into the basement laboratory. It wasn't far. The elevator dinged and Gaster fell inside, hitting the floor hard. He lay on his back on the elevator floor. He raised a trembling hand and summoned a single hand-shaped bullet, then fired it at the floor button. The button shattered, but the elevator dinged again and its door slid closed. The vibration of the descending elevator felt like it was trying to shake him into dust.
Just a little longer.
The door opened into the basement laboratory, and Gaster dragged himself out. He sat back against the wall for a moment to catch his breath. The determination extractor was in view, so close.
Now, stand. Walk. Finish it.
He used the wall to pull himself back up, and that was when one of his arms simply fell into dust. There was no pain, just shock. He fell back against the wall, eyes wide, breathing fast. His vision went black for a moment. When his sight returned, all color had gone from the world. The laboratory was cast in black and white and gray, and there was monster dust on the floor. His dust.
No. Not yet. Please.
He looked at the determination extractor, the dark skull hanging from the ceiling, shadowing everything beneath it. He wasn't going to make it. Part of his face began to dissolve. No. With the very last of his energy, he ran. The syringes were in a small refrigerator next to the extractor. He knocked the entire thing over in his struggle to open it, sending syringes and beakers and test tubes everywhere. He grabbed the first one he could use. One of his legs turned to dust and he collapsed amid the broken glass. The rest of him was dissolving now. He jammed the syringe into whatever was left. His vision went black. Now we see. For a moment, there was nothing but the feeling of dissolving away into nothing, sinking into darkness. Then the sensations stopped. The universe seemed to rupture. Energy rushed through him, sparking and burning, searing its way into his soul. The pain was worse than dissolving. It felt as though he was melting, shaping into something else, like a spent candle. The sheer power was immense, infusing his every atom. And suddenly, living was as easy as deciding to. Suddenly, returning to a familiar shape was as easy as molding wax. It was all so easy. He opened his eyes and saw his own hands. 2 of them. They were trembling, but they were his. Colors looked strange, but they had come back. He patted himself down. His body was still here, whole. He touched his face. There was what felt like a scar or a crack running from the top of his head through his right eye. He closed his left eye. Immediately, color vanished again, returning to gray. Permanent effects, it seemed. His throat hurt. Had he been screaming? He looked at his hands again, flexed his fingers. Experimentally, he summoned a few bullets. They were different now. They were sparkling. He tossed the empty syringe away and stood easily. Energy was still flickering through him like lightning. He felt powerful. It was as if the universe was flowing through his soul. He understood it now. He understood everything. Determination was the key to it all. And now he was alive, whole, and determined. His face broke into a grin, and then he was laughing. He laughed and laughed, so hard he had to lean against the wall again. He laughed for what felt like hours. Then, abruptly, he stopped laughing. He looked around the laboratory. What a mess. There was broken glass and spilled fluids everywhere, as well as a trail of monster dust leading from the elevator. Seeing the dust made him grin again. The world had tried to take his life, and he had simply said no. Still, he couldn't stop now. No, there was too much work to do. He had to compile his findings, run some tests, take measurements. And of course, he had to clean up this mess. It wouldn't do for the staff to come in tomorrow morning and find monster dust everywhere. No, he couldn't have people asking questions. He touched the odd crack on his head again. Yes, he would need some kind of story, Some kind of explanation. Something believable. It wouldn't go over well if people found out that the famous Dr. W.D. Gaster had injected himself with an untested, potentially lethal substance. He imagined the look on Sand's face and laughed again.